When they both stepped outside and unlocked Mr. David's car, the school uniform was gone. They realized it was missing. The uniform was nowhere to be seen. "Where is the uniform?" Tina asked in disbelief as she peered into the empty car. "It was right here. I left it there. I saw it before coming to get you," Tina told Mr. David. "I'm not sure you know what you're talking about." Mr. David screamed, almost driven mad by disbelief. "I'm certain I left the school uniform right here at the back of the car. I saw it before locking the car and going into the hospital to see you. How could it have disappeared? No one else has my car key. Who could have taken and removed the uniform?" Mr. David fell to the ground, gasping for air. Tina was shocked, lost in thought, and stood motionless without saying a word. Mr. David could not endure it anymore and fainted. Tina screamed and called for help. The patient care assistants arrived and took Mr. David into the hospital, where he was treated immediately. After some hours, Mr. David woke up and found himself lying on a hospital bed with Tina sitting very close to him. "The doctor said you've been stressed. I think that's why you've started seeing things. You haven't had proper sleep since yesterday, and it's making you see things," Tina said to Mr. David. "Maybe you misplaced the uniform." But Mr. David knew what he had seen. He had seen the uniform earlier before it disappeared. He kept wondering if his wife was right, that his mind was playing tricks on him. "Let's go see the doctor," Tina said to her husband. Mr. David got up from the bed and joined his wife to go see the doctor. When they entered the doctor's office, they asked if Naomi was okay. The doctor told them they were free to go back with Naomi. He only advised them on what to avoid if they wanted her to get better quickly. "Don't allow your daughter to be around things that will make her unhappy. She needs to be happy always to help her heal faster," the doctor said to Mr. David and Tina. Mr. David wanted to tell the doctor that Naomi wasn't there, but something held him back. He thanked the doctor and paid all the necessary bills listed on the receipt. He also made sure to buy the necessary drugs from the pharmacy. Then, he left the hospital with his wife and Naomi. That night, after dinner, Mr. David went to bed with his wife, Tina. They took Naomi into Pascal's room, which was still intact 2 years after Pascal passed away. None of Pascal's belongings were thrown away or given out. It was as if he had never left. Tina always took her time to arrange the room and keep it clean. Whenever she felt the need to be with a child, she went in there. "Honey," Tina called her husband as they lay in bed. "Yes, dear," he responded. "Will you still go looking for her parents tomorrow?" Mr. David took a while and then sighed. "I don't know," he said, shaking his head. "I'm so confused. It seems like something is stopping me from finding the little girl's parents, and I just can't explain it," he said, staring at the ceiling. "I know it will sound selfish, but why don't we keep her? For her to have encountered an accident means her parents are not rich enough. We may give her back, and they won't be able to take care of her health issues. Let's keep her until she fully recovers and regains her memory." "Do you think giving her up after getting attached will be easy?" Mr. David asked, moving his gaze to his wife. "I don't know," Tina answered. It was a long night for the couple. Mr. David kept trying to figure out what made the school uniform disappear until sleep took them away. The next day, Mr. David woke up very early and went to check on Naomi. She was sleeping peacefully. He got ready for work and left the house. Tina stayed home to keep an eye on Naomi for a while. Naomi was having her breakfast when Deborah walked in after Tina opened the door for her. Deborah had called to ask about Naomi, and Tina told her she would be home the next day. Naomi greeted Deborah in a sweet, almost inaudible voice, and Deborah responded. Deborah dragged Tina by her hand out of where Naomi was seated and softly asked her about the next plan with Naomi since she was already better. Tina told Deborah that they planned to keep Naomi until she fully recovered. "I knew it. I saw the way you were feeding that little girl at the hospital. But let me tell you, Tina, you are my friend, and I can't give you bad advice. Return this little girl to her parents. You are a mother, and you know what you went through when you lost Pascal." "Don't talk about Pascal," Tina said immediately, cutting off Deborah's words. "How do you intend we find her parents?" She can't even remember herself. She needs intensive care, and I'm going to give it to her. This has nothing to do with Pascal, Tina said, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Back at Naomi's parents' home, Mommy, Naomi's sweet voice called out to Sandra. Sandra quickly turned, and there was Naomi in her school uniform, smiling at her. She was holding her lunchbox, and her smile was so cute as she shook her head slowly from left to right, showing a bit of her teeth. Sandra spread her arms wide for Naomi to run into them with so much joy. Naomi sprinted forward towards Sandra, but suddenly an invisible force stopped Naomi from reaching Sandra. Sandra couldn't explain what was happening. She then tried running towards Naomi, but couldn't. The invisible force then took the form of a man. It held Naomi and dragged her backwards while Naomi kept crying for her mother. "Give me my child. Give me Naomi back, please. She's all I have," Sandra kept shouting and crying bitterly. "She's never coming back to you," the man without a face said in a cold voice. Naomi suddenly stopped crying. The man smiled at her, and she smiled back. The man held Naomi by her hand and walked away with her. Sandra couldn't understand what was going on. She tried running after them, but she slipped and fell down. "Naomi!" she shouted as tears ran down her cheeks. Sandy. Mr. Bright kept calling and tapping Sandra. Sandra woke up, and it was just a dream, but it felt so real to her. "He said he wouldn't give her back to me. He took her. They took my daughter. They took Naomi. Please bring her back," Sandra cried out, sobbing bitterly. "Who took our daughter? Did you see any face?" he asked, still holding her. No, I didn't see any face. He had no face. He said my daughter is no longer mine. He took my daughter. He took Naomi," Sandra said and continued sobbing. Mr. Bright kept consoling his wife, who wouldn't stop crying. She stood up and tried leaving the room, but Mr. Bright wouldn't let her. He didn't trust her judgment anymore. She was slowly losing it. He dragged her slowly back to the bed. Mr. Bright didn't know who to call at such a time. He decided to call his mother since Sandra's mother was no more. Mr. Bright's mother picked up the call and tried consoling Sandra over the phone. Ever since Naomi went missing, she had always called them to know if there was any update. Mr. Bright told his mother about Sandra's dream and the faceless man she saw. "Did you say a faceless man?" his mother asked over the phone. "Yes," she said, "the man was faceless." "Hello? Hello, Mama?" Mr. Bright kept saying over the phone without getting a response. It turned out his mother switched the call off upon hearing about the faceless man. Back at Mr. David's office, he was seated, but his mind was not at rest. He kept thinking about what he had discussed with his wife. He began to pace around inside his office. Mr. David really wanted to find Naomi's parents, but couldn't tell what was stopping him. He didn't want to get attached to Naomi because giving her up would be more difficult. Keeping her wouldn't be a good decision either because he could already feel the love his wife had for Naomi. Things got confusing for Mr. David. His mind went back to the uniform that got missing and then reappeared inside his car. He had arrived at the hospital but didn't enter because of the distress call from his wife. Nothing was really wrong with Naomi, and he drove all the way back, denying his wife the right to console herself from the death of their only child, which she hadn't gotten over. The decision was getting tougher and tougher for Mr. David. The doctor had also said Naomi stood a chance of losing her memory forever. What if she loses her memory forever? Mr. David asked himself and sighed. Meanwhile, back at David's home, Tina and her friend Deborah were still having a heated conversation about whether to keep Naomi or return her to her parents. "I'm so sorry, Tina. I know what you're thinking. You call me a bad friend for talking to you about all this. I just feel the little girl's parents need to know that their daughter is okay. I really can't help it. If my daughter was knocked down, the pain of losing a child is... Please stop it, Deborah. Please, can you leave my house? I plead with you. Don't open old wounds. Just go," Tina pleaded, trying to hold in the building tears. "It's okay. I will go," Deborah said and picked up her